Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Again, so happy you could all join us. It is always my absolute pleasure to introduce our guest tonight, Mr. Michael Fullan. And while I know I can stop there, I won't. I will still tell you a few things about him. Hailing from Toronto, Ontario, worldwide expert on whole system change, co-director for new pedagogies for deep learning, the author of more books than I can count, many of which continue to have a profound impact on school leaders and how they think about their work. Michael is frequently on the short list of most influential educators. He works all over the world, and frankly, he's more than an expert, he's a giant. As Melissa shared, his co-author of this text, Joanne Quinn, cannot be here with us tonight, but I'll tell you a little something about her. If you don't know anything about her, she also hails from Canada. She too is a best-selling author and co-author. Many of these books have been done with our host tonight, Michael, or our guest tonight. She is an international consultant on systems change, leadership, and learning. Working with Michael, she is also the global director of new pedagogies for deep learning. She has provided leadership at all levels as a superintendent of education, implementation of education. She was even an implementation advisor to the Ontario Ministry of Education and director of continuing education at the University of Toronto. They have come together again for their latest book, The Drivers, Transforming Learning for Students, Schools, and Systems. It is a must-have book for school leaders ready to take education to the next level. I think Michael and Joanne might say that there really is only one level if we want to make the promise of schools for all a reality. So I am thrilled to turn it over to Michael now to take us a little bit deeper into his latest project. Michael?
Thanks very much, Melissa and Tanya. It's great to be with you all. And I want to set the context a little bit in terms of the nature of our work and who's who. I think the best way to describe the work is that the first half of my career, which goes back a long time, I was an academic. So I wrote books and they were a bit removed from reality. I like to think they were also good conceptually. But since about 2000, all of my work has been applied. That is, we team up with different levels of the system, cause change together, and then after we've done it, I write a book. We write a book after the work, and then we team up again. And after we've done the next phase, we write even better books, let's say. So this is very much driven by practice. This means that it's a lot more specific, it's a lot more focused, it's a lot more comprehensive. There are a team of 8 of us or so that mix and match. I would describe the work as 2 phases. One of them is system change. So what does it take to transform a whole system, minimum size district, I want to say, or state or province, or sometimes a country. And then in terms of that kind of transformation, in addition to the system change, and this is very practical work, I want to emphasize, but you'll see it when I talk about it that way. We also have focused particularly in the last 10 years on deep change, new pedagogies for deep learning, which is just a way of describing that the shift is, and I'll describe the shift explicitly, much more natural to the learning of students, what they want to do, much more powerful to society. So we are now in this mixing and matches. Joanne and I do the deep learning leadership. I won't name the other 6 people, but one is a neuroscientist who's also a child psychiatrist that works on the deep learning from prenatal to the whole life, actually, because it's also adult focused. Another one has led the transformation of system change from in Ontario from the Ministry of Education level. Somebody else is grounded in district work, who led a district for a number of years, transforming it when it grew. So they're all practitioners, including me. I think it's rubbing off on me, and there's hopefully these last 20 years since we've been working on this in earnest. The other conclusion I want to forecast for you is that in one sense, I started off with trying to make change happen better from the top. So I was advisor to the the Premier of Ontario, Dalton McGuinty, and we raised the bar, closed the gap in literacy and numeracy, high school graduation for 5,000 schools in Ontario, 2003 to 2013. So that was a period of really strong success. And we tried to, even though it was from the top, it was jointly determined, one of the things we know we have to do. But since taking on the more complicated level, since COVID, since we got, most of us saw testing and that focus as distractive, as dysfunctional, we started to conclude, and this is very explicit in the driver's book with 5 cases, which I'll refer to some of them later, is that we concluded that you really have to, and I'll give you the slide on it later, just think of the terms, the 3 terms I'm going to use: build the base, which is teachers and students, for example; strengthen the middle, which is the district and that kind of level. And then I'm going to leave the third part. What's the role of the policy? Let's leave that dangling because I have an odd phrase to capture it, but it basically is shifting the center of gravity away from the top towards the bottom, ending up at the same place, only better. That is system change that really is happening. So let's see what I mean by that. Here is, if we talk about the purpose of education, I could dwell a certain amount, but I'll only take a short period to say it's not working, and it hasn't been working for increasingly so since 1950, 1980, 2000. Increasingly so, I want to put it this way, almost all of the research that I've seen on this topic, what does education look like from the point of view of the students? Whether this is U.S., where a lot of the U.S. has, people have pointed out before, they have the best data, but not necessarily the best system. So they've got a lot of good data, got a lot of good insights. So we've got strong data there, but it's also in England. It's in Australia where we work. And in all of these cases, I want to put it, directly, explicitly, by the time students get to around grade 11, there are about 80% of them that are don't find school very relevant. They're either alienated or bored. 80% is a lot, and some of them will still go on to graduate. And one of the books that I've used in the system work referred to those ones that succeeded, in quotations, call them the wounded winners. That is, they got the good grades. They went to university. Mainly it appears for a lot of them to please their parents, but they weren't any happier. They weren't any more effective in society. In fact, increasingly less and less effective. So think of that. The problem was too much emphasis on testing, but the real problem was the narrow agenda. That it seems odd to say it this way, but that direct learning is not the only thing that will make for a strong graduate in a complex society that has to cope. So in this way, I want to say we've documented this. This book has this with 5 case studies and lots of arguments. You'll see a few slides. I've only did about 10, 11 slides for this presentation, but we'll see that the shift is not eliminating academic learning. Obviously, that's one of the core purposes. But what it says is that academic learning is not the only thing or not the best way of getting a best education. And so I put it, I've drawn the conclusion here. I double click there. I've drawn the conclusion here. Think of it this way, the new purpose of education. And this is deliberately said this way because we think this is what is happening in the most successful cases. We think it is the way the society should go. So the purpose of education is not to produce graduates who can pass tests with high marks. The narrow academic function is not the purpose of education. It includes that is doing well academically, but a stronger and a deeper purpose. And this is one that many students want. In fact, they're leading students as change makers, as I'll refer to it later, is that to cultivate civic-minded, and the word citizenship, civic, is it could be misinterpreted a lot of way. We mean civic-minded about the community, about all levels. It really is a fundamental relationship. We call it the humanity paradigm. So civic-minded, and it's about their own future. Where are they going as a future person in this world, this complex, deteriorating world? But also, I want to be good in society. I want to cope and do well, but I also want to be good for society. And right off the bat, I can tell you a good case to look at if you're curious as to what this means in more detail. And I mentioned we have 5 case studies in the book. They're about 10, 12 pages each. And the one I want to ask you to look at when you get the book is Anaheim Union High School District in Anaheim, California. It's a district from some of the schools are grade 7, 8, others are grade 9. And it has, over the last 9 years, developed, I was there 3 days ago, has developed a system that has civic-minded, that has competencies that I'll show you. And they've cultivated it from the beginning to the destination of graduating from there. And they have explicitly, their mission statement for the district is unlimited you. That's how they think, unlimited you. But the most important thing are the details. They started in at the beginning of when students first get there, they cultivate it, the relationships, all of those things. You can read it in the case study. They are very successful and they are producing graduates, but these students are starting to be this good at grade 9 and grade 10, and they're so-called capstone projects, which 100% of the students do as individuals. So we get in that production of this. These students are change makers. They articulate themselves this way. They show up this way. The companies, the civil agencies that around the parents, everybody knows this. I don't mean it's a absolute perfect place, but I mean they have made a transformation towards this purpose. And I've used the word here, or the term 2024 deliberately, because I think of it this way. We've been part of all of this in January 2020, before COVID had been evident. The schools were still boring and alienating. But people had they didn't have an urgency, or they didn't do enough about it. And then since that time, what COVID has done is it's made matters worse. On the one hand, it took off the cover, so to speak, and showed and exposed everything that was difficult about schooling and boring and wasn't working. But it also aggravated. Teachers are more worn out now. There's a lot of ways in which the energy to the well-being of people, students and adults alike, have deteriorated because of the additional pressure. It's not only the additional pressure of it just something dysfunctional, but it's the fact that it wasn't satisfying in the human paradigm sense. It wasn't satisfying. So we think, and we've seen it now in the work we're doing, people are coming to do something about it. Most people are still struggling. But I think I could say accurately that there's kind of a rebound effect now, where we are helping in the jurisdictions we're working with, probably 6, 7 countries at least. We're helping in those jurisdictions. The systems get more able to have an impact on their students and on their society locally and more regionally than ever before. And that this is something that's in the making. People are still recovering, as you know. It's still negative, but if we follow the advice and the deep learning and the driver's book, if you get this right and you begin to develop it, it will lead towards something that has to be a breakthrough, because the system, without doubt, has been declining on all measures, it seems, since about 1980. That is, inequality has increased. Lack of success in academic terms has decreased. The evidence is very clear. OECD has documented that's right all over the place for these countries. So that's so I want to head it towards a ramp feeling of moving towards 2024, doing the things that set the table, doing the things that get people excited about the social energy that will be required to move into this. So this is I'm going to be more explicitly, as I said, about the reversal of bottom-up change that ends up with system change. And I think about it this way: make the internal system the driver. The internal system is the school, the community, and the district. If you're in a district where the district is part of the hierarchical problem, I would put them on the outside because they're part of the problem. And I would think of this, the individual school and the students and the parents and the community as the driver. But in Anaheim, where the district is such that it's that good, then I'm wanting the district, because we need the district to be effective in order for this to be reversed powerfully. So that's the driver. And then it contends with the external system. And I've simplified it because there's the state and federal level. But basically, the external system is anything outside the local district level that you're relating to, and that will be required to move forward. So back to the students. Here's a little excerpt from Jal Mehta. Jal Mehta and Sarah Fine did a great book about, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago now. They were one of the first ones to study deep learning. So deep learning, I'll give you our definition later, but presumably it's learning that has greater depth of knowledge, greater depth of skills and competencies than academic learning and repeating it on a test. And so they had a big grant to study, this would have been 7 years ago when they started, big grant to study schools that were had reputations for deep learning across the US. And they spent a whole year, I don't know how many days and hours, but enormous amount of time, the two of them with their team, studying and examining deep learning. Remember, in schools that were supposed to be already doing it. And they ended up saying after 2 years, we set out to look for deep learning, and now we're going to call our book In Search of Deep Learning. At the end, they call it In Search of Deep Learning. And what that says is they didn't find it. But they wrote a book, in fact, an award-winning book, the Grammar Award, which is a great, fantastic identifying books that have social impact. Gave an award to the search of In Search of Meaning and Deep Learning, I should say. And in this, the reason they got it, they did such a great job. They showed why it wasn't working. They found it in this or that classroom. They found it in after schools programs. They found it in the energy of some students. But it was definitely not much system change. And so since then, they've been working. In fact, we have the two of them are evaluating our deep learning now and going to give us a report by the end of 2023 on this work. But I love this phrase that Jal and Sarah and Amanda Datnow, who work with them, they said, and this I've been saying it in other words, this is the best succinct, powerful way of saying it, is that there's a yawning gap between how schools are organized, how they function, and how students experience them, and how youth learn or want to learn. And I won't repeat the 5 things, you see them on the slide, but you can see that students, they want a sense of purpose. They want belongingness. They want some meaning. They want to connect with others when they're doing this. And all of those things, and big one at the end, want the opportunity to contribute to the world. So this is the positive light in a very dark tunnel where this is not happening. And again, 8 out of 10 students tend to be along this line instead of satisfied. Hardly any of them are. So this has led us to think of students as change makers. There's a couple of things that have to happen first, obviously, but we're seeing that teachers are vital to this. And if we had more time, I talk about the teaching profession more fully. It's not the teaching profession historically has always been somewhat atomistic, somewhat individualistic in its positioning, and that there have been some successes in collaborative schools. In one Corwin book I wrote with Mark Edwards a couple of years ago is called Spirit Work and the Science of Collaboration. And in that book, we had identified 7 districts across the US. They're named. They're large and small, 30 schools and 200 schools. And these were schools even in the midst of COVID, were doing quite well. And they had a very strong sense of moral purpose, or what we now call spirit work, wanting to have something meaning for the individual students in the short run and where they're going in the society. and they were also effective, and they did a lot of strong collaboration. I want to say, I'll just give you kind of a down payment on this right now. I tend to use, instead of the word collaboration now, I use connected autonomy. And connected autonomy says that it's good to be autonomous, good to have your own opinions. Isolation is bad, autonomy is good, but the autonomy has to be fueled, and you have to use something with it to contribute. And that's the connected part. So my definition is not just collaboration, do a PLC. It's very much grounded in the characteristics of what are effective changes. And what makes this big is that students really are wanting to be not only do well and different for themselves, they want to make a contribution to their school, to their community, and even more, even larger than that. So this makes learning exciting. So what we did in the book, then I'll get to the core of it here. We selected 4 drivers. I call it the humanity paradigm because it's if you think about what the alternative to the humanity paradigm, it's at some point I call it the bloodless paradigm, the one we have now, and it's bloodless because you can't find the essence of humanity in it. But if you wanted a less dramatic word, you could go to the French and call it laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is the system is there, it's the one we have, and it just goes on. Nobody thinks that they have any control over it. They think, well, it's a system I just happen to be in. We have changed that around and said there are drivers that will do 2 things simultaneously. They will increase learning, and they will increase belonging and meaningfulness of work of students individually and together with teachers, and they will make a big difference because of that. So these are the 4 drivers. They are paired, I guess I'll say, with their counterpart. But if we go to, I'll just name them and you can see them in more detail in the book. Well-being and learning is the first driver. They're not in order of importance. All 4 interact to provide the synergy for system change. But well-being and learning, what happens with this well-being was really never talked about very, very much before COVID. I mean, it was there and we had to look after that, and some kids were having trouble, but the term well-being never rose to its prominence now as we have it. And it's a strong thing, and it's part of the positioning of learning. So we have paying attention to well-being, and the learning is changing in the way that I will explain in more detail. It's learning that students are really fully involved in co-determining with students, which are really powerfully related to how they begin to identify what they might do in society, how they work with others to solve problems locally, and that this well-being and learning encompasses academic learning, but it replaces the narrowness of academic learning, not only with well-being, which by definition is wider, but also with its relationship to learning, where you'll see when we talk about the 6 competencies that these are really bigger than academic learning. They increase academic learning, but they also develop other parts of that. The second one, and we've been, I'm going to say helped by artificial intelligence, because when I was writing this section in November, not so long ago, AI came thundering on the scene, and I'll just say our framing of this is that social intelligence has lagged behind machine intelligence. Social intelligence means the intelligence of the group, and that and we have now in the places that we work, including Anaheim, we are seeing AI grabbed by the proactive social intelligence part of our paradigm and used to important deep benefit for learning. We know that AI has a life of its own. It's got huge business support behind it. It does a lot of wrong things, things that are ineffective and bad for humanity, and those have to be examined. There are 2 books in our book by 2 women social scientists that had a strong critique of technology, including AI. You can look those up in the book. They're fantastic, and they're in the same direction that we were going, which is we need to focus on the negative aspects of technology and forcefully, but we need to build up the positive ways in which technology can be used. Technology should never be a driver because it doesn't have any spirit, but it could be an accelerator. And now AI could be a big accelerator. So you'll see that in the book. Equity, equality, investments. This is a massive topic. Equity is kind of a fair start, and the emphasis that goes into that. Equality is equal outcomes eventually, but without going into the historical details much, you know, at least in general terms, but I know in specific terms, that since 1980, the gap between those that are well off financially and those that aren't has increased dramatically, and it keeps increasing. It's got incredible distortion that favors the rich, the top 1%, if you like, or whatever, the 5%. And there's 4 or 5 books by women economists, as it turns out, that we review in the book that describe that in chapter and verse. It's an ugly, ugly picture because it keeps getting worse. And we're talking here about how to make those equality strategies and the money and the investments that one could say. In fact, in another case study in the book, San Diego County, that we are working with. Again, I just came back from there. San Diego County has 42 districts, 500,000 students, and the county board, which we are part of, as well as the district partnerships, passed a motion last year that over the next 7 years, they're going to reduce poverty by 30% and increase learning and well-being measurably within that period of time. Nobody's done that before so deliberately. That's big. It's a huge, complex problem, but that's the kind of problem the drivers are meant to be trying to influence. And so the investment, remember, this interacts. If you do 1 and 2 and 3 together, they spin on this. The last one, systemness, is a bit abstract sometimes. I have to say the good news is that students relate to the concept of systemness rather readily. They think of this as they think of things as connected. They really see and before, even 5 years ago, if I was talking systemness, people would say that, they wouldn't even hear the second sentence. Now they're saying, yeah, we're beginning to understand the world as a system. We're beginning to understand that the combination of outside things in our community and where we're in the school, they're connected. And that this kind of systemness is really is being forced upon us. And you know what? And Peter Senge has said this, so has Gene Clinton, who's our neuroscientist, that kids have a natural affinity to think of more about connections and systemness than adults do. And that this is a powerful way in which it's being repositioned. So this is the coherence of learning in the big way, the sequence of that. So let's build on this a little bit. I've tried to give you, the main concepts here that we've been working with. Some of them are new. They're powerfully new because they are coming from the best leaders that we have, and the best leaders are found among students, teachers at various levels. They're not always the formal leaders. So think of these 3 concepts. We have 4, really, if you count lead learners, and just mull over this because they feed on each other. They have come from our empirical work in districts like Anaheim and the 7 districts in the Spirit Workbook, and another, 50 or 60 from different countries. And it's an interactive thing. Systemic is when we realize that 4 or 5 things affect each other, and they affect each other in adverse ways or positive ways, depending on how we channel them or how we think of them. So think of these, not in order of importance. All 4 of these are equal because it's a system. Spirit work and humanity. This is the spirit work that we referred to in our book, the Mark Edwards book. It's the fact that students and teachers and the superintendents in that group were thinking about, we are really doing spirit work. Moral purpose is not is something that is strong, but this is deeper. This is about whether humanity survives. This is about the indigenous philosophy of what's our relationship to the earth. So spirit work is not something that is abstract. It's something that drives it. When we sat down individually with the 7 superintendents in our spirit book, after we had gathered the data, and we thought about using the word spirit work, and when we tested it out with them individually, within a nanosecond, each of them said, that is how I feel our work is like. This is not just old moral purpose, get some scores up. This is more fundamental to humanity. So that's a big one. Another new one that's big, contextual literacy, a great concept, at least. Contextual literacy means when you become more insightful about the context in which you are living or are leading. More insightful about the context. What this means is if you go from one context to another, you take a new job, it means that you become, to a certain extent, ineffective until you learn more about that context. You become an apprentice. We use it. An expert and apprentice. Experts know the context, they do well. COVID made us all apprentices. We still don't know exactly what to do. So this is a reminder for people for leaders, whatever you are, that when you change jobs, when your circumstances change, you are to a certain extent put back into a learner position. You better have the humility of an apprentice. You better learn from others who know more. Sometimes it's student or community, but you have your own expertise. Otherwise, you shouldn't be in there as a leader. And your own expertise, you don't need to hide it under a bushel. You need to use it. So when you're a learner and you're an expert, a lead learner, you're appreciated all the more. If you pretend to know more than you really do, it's called the imposter syndrome. People find that out within 3 days. You can't fake it. You really have to be this good. But the learners get appreciated because they're learning. They also get appreciated because they have expertise. So big one. Connected autonomy, I've already said that. This is a single concept. It doesn't mean it's a continuum. I'm connected over here. I'm autonomous over here. On any given day, you're simultaneously connected and autonomous. It's a dynamic equilibrium prospect, and you should think of it that way. You should value your autonomy, and you should value your connectedness. And then finally, if you take the lead learner concept, we mean it in 2 ways. First of all, it does apply to all learners. Students can be learners, as they are in our projects. But the 2 ways I'm using it is lead learner means I am modeling learning. I am a learner. I go into things and people can tell that I'm asking questions and I don't think I know everything. I'm learning. So that's one way. The other way, which is more subtle and more powerful, actually, when you hear what I define it, is that a leader who's in a given position, as a principal, superintendent, or teacher leader, or community leader, whatever, after, let's say, 6, 7 years of being in that position, the measure of success for us is 2 things. One is how much impact they've made on student learning and community development. That's the obvious one. But the other one that's more subtle and more powerful is how many good leaders they've left behind who can go even further. So your purpose as a leader is to develop leadership of others that lives beyond you. That is your legacy. Your legacy is not on your success. It's the human development that can go even farther than you did. So makes sense, and it's attractive. So let's go now into closer to the students. One of the things that we have been instrumental in changing, 2 things actually. One is shift the emphasis to a more fundamental concept of learning, which we call the global competencies. And the other one is about what causes those competencies to thrive. But you can look at these 6. You can call the first one 2 pieces of 1, but the global competencies are the kinds of competencies that we want students to develop. 4 of those used to be they were around in 1995 as we headed towards the year 2000. People were talking then, you'll recall those of you who are been there that long, that people talked about 21st century learning. And they tended to think of what I'll call the academic 4: collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking. And though it would be good if those flourish, creativity, we know from many people, including Sir Ken Robinson, creativity never went anywhere on any kind of substantial basis. But they were feeding into academic learning, certainly collaboration, communication, critical thinking. But there was something missing there for us. And for us, it was the more fundamental. Where am I going as a human? Where is the essence of me? Not just the academic learning, but the fundamental humanity, the purpose. And we called it citizenship on the one hand. We also called it character. It's noteworthy, I think, that Anaheim, when you start to read that case, they took our first, let's say, the character, compassion, and citizenship, and they said, no, we want only one C there. We'll call it the fifth C. It's called compassionate learning. So their fifth C, which is a big driver, drives the other four. They have all five. The first four plus the collapse of those two. But I like, maybe we doing over, we might even condense it ourselves. But I love the way that Anaheim and others like that now are having scores of students who reflect compassionate leadership to make a difference with very concrete ways. Another case study we have in the book is Ottawa Catholic School Board, which is in Ontario. In Ontario, there's a funding of both general public schooling and Catholic schooling on an equal basis. It's a long story, but they're a public school, and they have 80 schools, and they started 8 years ago with us with 7 schools of the 80 in deep learning competencies again, another 8 schools the next year, that's 15, and then the rest of them in year 3, all 80, and they are a going concern across the whole system. With all of the things I've said up to this point, I can say with confidence, you will find them in the Ottawa case. You will find them if you go to Ottawa, and that is a fantastic accomplishment given the odds and the run through of COVID that came in the middle of them developing this. They are very strong academically, and they are very strong in terms of the social change-making ability and knowledge of students. So you can see that in that case. It shows up in Anaheim through that fifth C. All the students in Anaheim, every student I'm talking about now, will be talking about fifth C compassion. They'll be talking about demonstrating what that looks like. They'll be talking about their capstone projects that show. I mean, 100% of the students. So this is what we're talking about. And then what is going to make this kind of develop. We have our own version of this. It's this deep learning design. And it's complicated, but it's not overwhelming, I'm going to say. It has to do with learning partnerships between and among students and teachers and community. It has to involves changing the learning environment, so it's no longer just based in this narrow classroom. We call it leveraging digital. That's right now where artificial intelligence lays. It's all the technology and the development of it. And pedagogical practices is really the deeper learning of students as learners, students as creating their own learning. We have Anaheim has a measure of this. It's in 3 levels, emerging and then eventually effective. Ours has 4 levels, and it's the same thing. We're teamed up with a University of Melbourne project in Australia, which is called New Metrics. And they are measuring for 100% of the students. They're measuring the 6 competencies that we're talking about, and they've developed that because they've said our old measures and the measure of graduation in Australia to get into universities is distorted. That is, students don't find any value up. They find themselves forced to, the ones that want to get to university, they're forced to do it, but it's irrelevant to their interests. Going back to Jal Mehta's yawning gap problem. But what they've done now, compatibly with us, because we're partners, is to move into this. Short point here, I'm going to say is, or maybe a deep point, is that ACT and other the test at the end of high school, that has become less and less. In fact, many states are not using it. That's a step in the right direction, but you have to have a replacement. I can say accurately that replacing those with some measures, especially around the 5th and 6th C that we are doing, is a better measure of the quality of the learning capacity of the graduates of those kinds of systems. And that's where the bigger case is heading, is to replace testing with the competencies, and adding to the competencies academic learning that includes critical thinking, collaboration, and communication, and is bounded by that. So you can have academic learning and deep learning, and they feed on each other. And we've seen it all over the place. And it's hard to do because you need to be this good. The group needs to be this good. But because it's motivating, because you get somewhere, it's got lots of possibilities. Now to just at the end here, there's an intriguing, I'm going to say, reframing we've done of system change. And this is coming, this is my sense of what should happen. And the first two were pretty obvious: build the base, students and local community. The stuff now, the more investment on community development and community learning. State of California put in $4.1 billion in that every school should be a community learning center, which means that the factors in the community and the factors in the school should be integrated. Not only the factors in the community in a narrow sense, but also mental health, physical health, all the things to do with poverty. There's a mobilization in California. I don't think you can do this so readily. I know in San Diego we're trying to do it more fully and explicitly, but my point about it, this is a wider than academic learning content base. So build the base. Mobilize the middle, which is not only the district, but the district working with other districts. And here I've left the policymakers out almost. And admittedly, this is a little provocative or playful. I've said, why don't we think about intriguing the top policymakers? The policymakers who got things wrong, let's say, because the system isn't working and is not improving. There are a lot of ways of not doing what they want done. Is the way I would put it. I don't think you need to brag about it, but I do think that we need to be not driven by the wrong drivers at that center level, and that if we build the base in the middle, we are going to be able to gain professional power because we'll know what we're doing more effectively, and political power because it's working, because parents will team up with it, all of those things. So we hope that policymakers will come into it, but this sounds strange to put it this way. One of the people I was in one of the systems we were working with was talking about what they were doing on a pretty large scale. And they said, the last thing we want to do is invite the government to endorse it, the ministries of education, the departments. And they were basically saying, we want the government to know what we're doing, but not to like it, but not to run it. So my message, if there's any single message here, it's recalibrating the system so that the local and the middle are more driving the system and are interacting with the policymakers on that basis. So two more things. Students effective in society, effective for society. That's the dual goal. That's the student as change makers. And if you sit with a group of students, once they get in a little bit into this mode, they will say, absolutely, I want to be effective in society. I want to have a life. My wounded winners concept that I mentioned earlier, that's not a life for a lot of those students, but effective in society makes sense. Effective for society means that you're conscious that I have to, as a student, make a contribution. It might be small in my community, might be larger what I'm doing for the region or whatever, but it's definitely relevant for my learning and my role to be good in society for myself and good for society and improving it. And then finally, and this goes to our San Diego goal, I think the ultimate goal here, and this sounds really incredibly unrealistic, I'm going to say, reduce poverty while increasing well-being and learning. That is actually the tangible goal that San Diego County, with its 42 districts and its 500,000 students, say we're going to do that. And whether they were doing it or not, it might be a colossal failure. I'm as long as it's tried with the knowledge and development that I'm talking about, it'll be worth it. So I think that this, in short, this is positioning the drivers in a way. You have to be a partner in this. It's joint determination. You have to have good possibilities of doing it. So we've got about 15 minutes left. I'm going to take down the show. You can get these slides later, and we can then talk about this in more detail. So that's a wrap for the drivers.
We did have a couple of questions that came up, Michael, while you were presenting that I made note of. The first one, which part of the humanity paradigm concerns the nature system where we're living?
The nature system?
Yes.
Yeah. I could have mentioned it, but there are underpinning this, and it's in the book, there are two colossal problems that humanity has. You could subdivide, but there's two big ones that are colossal. One of them is a growing inequality, and the same one is a deterioration of social trust. So that is one piece of humanity. Low social trust, high inequality on every dimension is a bad thing for humanity, and that's colossal. The second colossal is the environment. And so part of our definition of goals is, and that the students as change makers. Students are change makers and want to be for both the impact on the learning side and the impact on environment. In fact, those two things feed on each other, as many people know that. And you don't do environment without learning. You don't do learning without environment. These are co-equal goals. Why? Because they're fundamentally connected and feed on each other in a positive or negative way. And also that they are colossal, dangerous developments we have been allowed to happen for at least 75 years, more, but at least 75, and they're worse and worse. In fact, they're accelerating. So I'm going to say, and this is not an exaggeration, that humanity as we know it, life as we know it, could be gone in the next 50 years because it's so far down. And what's going to save it? Lots of things could do it, politicians sometimes, but really what's going to save it is a new generation of learners who are coming out, becoming citizens and wanting to tackle those two things as co-related priorities for the educational system.
Thank you. We got another question about your list of 6 C's, the deep learning 6 C's. And this one was, why don't you include cooperation in the C's?
Well, actually, you could put a lot of different, I mean, I'm sure we could add 3 or 4 if we brainstorm the C's. So there is a limit and you have to stop somewhere. But cooperation, I think, but it's already there. Collaboration includes cooperation. So that there's nothing, I don't think there's anything that is missing that stands out as an independent, concrete entity that's not there. So cooperation is definitely collaboration. And remember also that we have the system change mindset about this. I didn't go into this in detail, but the book I did for Corwin called Nuance, which was maybe 3-4 years ago. So the Nuance book and everything since then basically says that any complex problem needs to be solved through joint determination of the solution. Joint determination between, if I'm a leader, I will never get anywhere if I do not jointly determine that direction with the students and teachers and others in I will have good ideas, but one of my ideas will be to build up the commitment and the capacity for people to do that. So that requires a lot of not just cooperation, the other C's, but joint determination is powerful. Certainly cooperation is key. I think connected autonomy is a stronger way of expressing cooperation.
Okay, and we had one more come into the chat. And if you other folks have any questions that are coming to you, we do have a few minutes left in our presentation. This next one is the structure or schedule of schools changing to make this happen. And I'm not sure this, Julie, this is a question from Julie Kopp. I'm not sure if this is referring to all the things.
No, I get that question actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just submitted. I can't say too much about it because the decision has been made, but I submitted an op-ed to Ed Week last week that I'm hoping they will publish in the next 10 days. And the title of the op-ed is Could Teachers Be a Force for System Change? That's the title of it. And the answer to that is right on this question, actually, is that teachers could be a force for system change. Well, first of all, the subtitle of our op-ed is An Untested Hypothesis. So part of what we say at the beginning is that actually teachers have never had the opportunity en masse as a force to actually play, because from day one, it was the isolated classroom. And now we have had collaborative schools here and there in some districts, but basically teaching is not a collaborative profession in the fundamental nature of that. So what is the solution? The solution is change the structure and change the culture. Change the structure so teachers can work together more with students, and change the culture so they'll work together effectively. So behind that question that was asked is a fundamental need, and we will be pushing for structural and cultural change to make it possible for the drivers to be as effective as they could be.
Thank you so much. I do not see any other questions coming into the chat. If you've tuned in to this presentation and you think of a question that didn't occur to you, you're always welcome to email info@corwin.com, and we can make sure that your question gets to Michael. So thank you, Michael, for this wonderful presentation. Thank you to everybody who took time out of your day, evening, morning to join us. And you will be receiving an email with a copy of the recording and a certificate of attendance that will be coming soon.
Thank you
Thanks
very
so
much.
much.
Thanks. I hope to see you in the field where we do this work, because it's going to require a lot of people. And the lines of direction are getting clear, and the satisfaction of an impact is possible. So I hope we'll go for it.
Thanks, Michael. Take care, everyone.
Yep. Take care.